Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I am your host, Jim Gramm. Alongside me is my co-host, Billy Brandt. On today's show, we have a lot of headlines to go over, including Jose Aldo out of UFC 189 and possible ban on intravenous fluids used for weight cut recovery in mixed martial arts. We're also going to recap Bellator 139 and UFC Fight Night 70, Romero versus Machida. Once again, I am Jim Gramm, your host. Over there, he is Big Shot Bill. And how's it going today, Billy?
Pretty good. I mean, a little upset about 189, but we'll get into it.
Let's start there. Let's start with 189 because that's probably one of the bigger headlines we're going to talk about today. It had been rumored as of last week. If you go back to last week's show, we were talking about Jose Aldo possibly pulling out of UFC 189 with fractured or bruised ribs, wherever you want to call it, whatever report you read. There's kind of conflicting reports. But either way, Jose Aldo sustained an injury to his ribs while training for his title defense against Conor McGregor. You also had the article by bjpenn.com / Reddit user tracking down MGM Grand posters of McGregor Aldo, where many of the places where banners had been placed for this event had been removed. And that was documented by a user on Reddit. You can see it on reddit.com / RMMA. Billy and I go on there a lot of times commenting with the folks there on RMMA. So shout out to if anyone is a user there of RMMA. But he tracked down some of these missing posters. And while at the time, and not only reading the bjpenn.com article, but also, following the thread on Reddit, you're kind of like, maybe that's just circumstance. Maybe they just wanted other banner. I don't know. It didn't mean anything. The reports came out. The fight's happening. Dana White's tweeting people, everybody relax. That's kind of what we were talking about last week. Now, all of a sudden, he is out. And it looks as though the replacement fight will still be for a title, albeit an interim title. Conor McGregor is staying on the card. And former two-time featherweight title challenger Chad Money Mendes has been tabbed to take on Conor McGregor, a fight a lot of fans have wanted since Conor McGregor has burst onto the scene here in the past 12 months. And Chad Mendes, even on short notice, this dude's always ready. Pretty much all the dudes at Alpha Male are always ready to go. So I don't think short notice, win or lose for Mr. Mendes is an excuse. I think he's going to be ready for this fight. I think he's been ready for this fight for quite a while. And I think for Conor McGregor, it's a huge change in adjustment of opponent. You're going on a guy that is primarily a striker, a guy who's really quick, great leg kicks, and obviously a really good chin. Now you're taking a guy, probably a little bigger than Jose Aldo, maybe a little stronger, maybe hits a tad harder with his hands, and obviously known for taking things to the ground, which is kind of completely against Jose Aldo's MO. So you really got to change on the fly your strategy of attack. Now, Conor being Conor, and obviously, as some listeners know, Billy, you're a big fan of Conor McGregor. And through all the bravado, I think the guy is a very intelligent guy. And I think for him, he may just say, I'm not going to change up anything I'm doing, because I think his bravado and arrogance and demeanor and his persona to the public won't allow him to say that he's going to think and rethink things. But realistically, he has to be changing things up. There's no way he can come into this fight with the same mindset as he would if Jose Aldo was still going to be across the cage from him.
Yeah, he got the worst deal out of this whole thing. Like, if you look at Mendes' style, he's going to do the same thing Chad Mendes is always going to do. He's going to throw them strong punches, take you down. It's way different from Aldo to Mendes. Aldo's going to fight, or Mendes is going to fight his fight either way. For McGregor, this is a lot of different stuff to worry about. But it's question marks, though, because a lot of people say, he hasn't fought a wrestler. We really don't know yet. We got to see it happen.
Now, the one thing that may help or hinder the fact that he uses kind of that wide karate style stance. Now, you could say that helps Chad Mendes in the fact that that's an easy single leg to take. But a lot of times, because his lateral movement forward and backward is so good using, the more sideways karate style stance, he may be able to get out of the way a little bit better. Lionel Machida was for many years very hard to take down using a very similar stance. And obviously you add in the fact he's kind of, instead of being more prone to a doubling using more traditional Muay Thai style stance, he knows that with that one leg real forward, like that's the only leg he's giving him. It's a little easier to try to stop a takedown. Now, whether or not that actually helps or hinders Chad Mendes in taking him down, that's some advantage that may help Conor kind of using that stance, just doing a real brief, breakdown of the two skills. Obviously, we're going to do a complete breakdown next week's show, but just kind of looking, obviously, that's something that may help him more than other guys that Chad Mendes has faced.
Yeah, I don't know what his takedown defense is like, but I'm assuming Mendes is so explosive and quick. I think he'll be able to take him down when he wants to. I think it's more going to be, can he hold McGregor there, or can McGregor work his way back to his feet?
So that is the big change. Jose Aldo out, and obviously it being in for interim title. We kind of talked about this a little bit last week, Billy. If Jose Aldo pulled out, should it be for an interim? And you were a little more against the interim thing just because it didn't look like the injury was going to force Jose Aldo that long. I'm against it in terms of it really shouldn't be for an interim because of the length of time. But I knew for the fact, because it's Conor McGregor and all the hype they're going to put, there was no way they weren't going to have him fight for the title. That's kind of was my thinking. So I'm against it, but I had a feeling it was going to happen regardless. And so now Chad Mendes is in. A lot of people also upset because they feel he's kind of skipping over Frankie Edgar. I don't know. I don't know if Chad Mendes, maybe because he fought back in April and you had Edgar fight in May, maybe the UFC knew that Mendes was ready to go. There was no doubt. And so they just took maybe the for sure thing instead of Frankie. And I don't know. I think Frankie Edgar will factor in this whole thing eventually. And like I said, it also depends how long Aldo actually is out. And maybe Frankie Edgar fights the winner of this fight before Jose Aldo gets a say in everything. Who knows? But obviously we got to wait for the fight at July 11th at 189 to happen before any sort of speculations and or decisions can be made.
Yeah, starting with the interim title, it really is. It's kind of disrespectful to Aldo, but like you said, we knew it was coming. McGregor, they had so much hype and so much built around this card, they almost had to. And I heard today, I read an article, I don't know how true it is, that he forced it. Like he said he wouldn't fight if it wasn't, which I kind of understand. It'd be pointless for him to risk it against Mendes otherwise. And on the second note, I don't think Mendes deserved it, but I think they gave it to him because in the short time they had, he'll bite on Conor's trash talk more. He'll feed more into that to build up the fight when Frankie he wouldn't have done much to build up. He'd be like, all right, we'll get in there and fight.
Also, it looks as though it will still be the main event of UFC 189, despite only being for the interim title. They're still going to keep Robbie Lawler against Rory MacDonald as the co-main event. I guess you could kind of keep it there because it's still Conor McGregor. But honestly, I would say I would kind of flip-flop the two.
I think even if it wasn't an interim title match, even if they were just fighting at this point, they would have still kept the main event.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I guess I could say they already printed up the posters, but actually they're going to have to reprint posters now that Chad Mendes is on there. That's why I was thinking it's an easy flip because it's obviously going to be a little different poster now, but that's the decision they made, and I'm excited for the matchup. That's, I think, the best thing about it. Regardless whether it's Frankie Edgar or Chad Mendes, whether you think Frankie Edgar was slighted or not, you can't deny that Chad Mendes, Conor McGregor isn't a great fight.
Yeah, either way you go with that, you get a great fight. And I'm also not saying that Robbie Lawler shouldn't have been the main. Most people are buying it because of Conor. I'm going to be honest, like, Conor built this card, so he kind of deserves it. And yeah, as far as the matchup, either way it would have been a great fight.
All right, let's move along and stick with the UFC here. Yesterday afternoon, the UFC has unleashed their new gear for the Reebok deal, having many of their fighters on their roster come to have a huge press conference, them trotting out in the new uniforms, the T-shirts and shorts, wearing the gloves, a lot of the champions, and kind of looking over, if you go on many different websites, on Twitter, you'll see the jerseys and kind of looking them over. They look all right. They're not great. They're not as bad as I thought they were going to be. They're still relatively generic. I'd like to see a little more customization, I guess, so to speak. Maybe we'll get that as we move forward. I guess the cool thing is, regardless of your favorite fighter, whether your favorite fighter is like a champion, a top contender, or maybe someone towards the bottom, all the UFC fighters will have their own shirt with their name on it. So I think from that standpoint, that's cool. For instance, obviously, Billy and I are from the Detroit area. We're huge fans of Darren Cruikshank, who we've had on the show many times. It's pretty cool that we can get like an official UFC like Darren Cruikshank shirt. I will say that part's pretty cool. Now, the overall design, maybe that part's not as cool, but it is cool that you can get a shirt from every fighter. Now, the price point of getting these shirts, relatively expensive as of right now, $80 to $95, depending on who the fighter is. That's maybe a little steep. I'd like to see that price point go down. Obviously, we've seen, sponsors won't be on there and whatnot. And also, they got to step up their game, not only in just having the name, but getting the name right. As you probably saw the most infamous picture there, they misspelled Gilbert Melendez's name on his jersey. Instead, it says Giblert Melendez. Maybe that's his brother. I'm not really sure. But as far as I know, there's not a Giblert Melendez fighting in the UFC.
Yeah, this whole thing just looked like a huge mess. I mean, for anyone that's not a champion or like within that huge name, I don't see anyone paying that much money for that shirt. And they look kind of weak to me. Everything about it I didn't like, man. I seen some dude on Reddit, not to bring it up again, he posted like a mock thread of like ones he made up, and they look so much better. And that's just this dude compared to what they could come up with at Reebok.
Right, and that's a dude who, I could be wrong, probably is not like a graphic designer or anything, just someone who's pretty good with Photoshop and just decided to tool around. And we have people at Reebok who've probably been doing this for years, designing clothing and merchandise for them. Yeah, and this is the best they could come up with.
If they want to keep that price point at 95, and that's a replica, so I'm assuming we'll have officials out for more or something.
Yeah, and obviously, the different material and stitched on as opposed to iron on, that stuff like that.
So they got to step up their game if that's the price point they want to stay at.
What I think would be cool is that each fighter, they kind of have like the UFC really big across the chest, and I'm assuming regardless of what the jersey ends up looking like, it'll probably have that. I'm fine with that. That's fine. That's the company. You got to make that big. But basically, they should go, all right, the UFC is going to be on this jersey, and they go to each fighter. What colors do you want? What scheme do you want? Like pinstripes? Do you want checkerboard? Do you want this? Do you want that? And be like, oh, well, this is how your name's going to be. Those two things I think should probably be static, so to speak. The logo and the name. And then it should be up to the fighter to go, oh, I want it red, but I want like black pinstripes. And that way it's still similar. Everyone still has, like I said, there's a couple things static, but each fighter kind of has their own look, and it can kind of change for fight. That way it's not like every fight they're only wearing this red one. They can kind of change it up for each fight. And I think that would be cool. I think that's like the future. And then also if you can design like your own one for a fan, like I could get my own jersey and it says like Jim Graham, and I can customize it in any style I want. And I want a checkerboard style, or I want black sleeves or blue sleeves or something. And that's the type of thing I'd like to see progress into it. Now, at least if you're not going to have fighters being able to wear, the company they want to represent or get paid to represent a company, so to speak, at least let them make the jersey as cool as they want, or make it that something they're proud to wear, regardless whether they're getting extra money for it or not.
Yeah, a little more freedom for some more personality. Like a lot of those classic shorts that you see some of the fighters wearing, give something like that for the jersey. So you see that one across, oh, that's this person or that's this person.
Let's go with the next big headline I really want to talk about here, Billy, and that is the USADA, better known as the United States Athletic Drug Administration. And they're the ones who's been partnered with the UFC to help crack down on performance-enhancing drugs. And coming into their new policy, which is starting pretty here soon with the UFC, one thing that will be changed is the use of intravenous fluid, which is most commonly used in the rehydrating process following fighters using a weight cut. And so far, according to the USADA CEO, Travis Tigert, he was on Ariel Helwani's show later this week, and I want to read a excerpt from that interview on that show. And this is reposted as a Bloody Elbow article. So the IVs are allowed under certain circumstances under WADA, which is the World Athletic Drug Agency, prohibited list. If you're in the hospital, clinic, or having surgery. If you need it outside of those, you have to apply for a TUE. It's not, as just indicated, not prohibited in most or any that we're aware of, licensing commission. So there's going to be some education, obviously, around that. The purpose for it was to ensure, and you may know, I don't know how closely you followed our investigation into cycling, but you saw it used a lot in cycling, because putting a bag of saline over 50 milliliters, for example, is the rule, would potentially mask or alter the blood testing that was done. And there were examples in there where athletes would put a bag of saline in their arm when they saw the blood collectors coming to collect their blood, and they just delayed reporting for 15 minutes. So that was really the purpose behind the rule. Now, typically the UFC doesn't do much blood testing. Now, whether or not the saline will affect the urine, I gotta believe it will too, because I think otherwise the rule wouldn't be as harsh or potentially harsh moving forward. And the reason I say this is because 50 milliliters, if you don't know what 50 milliliters is, if you go to your local party store and you see those little like tester bottles, you know, for like the one shot to put in your drink, that's about 50 milliliters. And that's not a lot of IV and or saline solution to help recover after water cutting 15 or 20 pounds. That's not really doing much for you. In fact, you're better off just not even putting that in your system at that point. So this is a big deal moving forward because a lot of fighters use this. And I put it on our Facebook page a couple of days ago, and I know one of our listeners, Eric T., asked how would they enforce this policy. Well, I know for a fact when I was in Vegas, I got to hang out a lot with Darren Kirkshank, and when I met up with him after the weigh-ins, he had mentioned that he already contacted a local doctor to go to his practice and get an IV that way. That's typically how the practice how it goes. So and obviously if you just weighed in, you're really anxious to do that. You're not going to drive that far to go get an IV. You're probably going to stay within 5 or 10 miles of wherever the fight is. So it wouldn't be that hard for the USADA or the UFC to find all the doctors within the location and say, hey, if these fighters or these persons contact you in regards to using intravenous fluid, you know, you can't accept them, just you can only give them this. And I don't think it would probably be that hard to police. It'd be pretty easy to do. And to me, regardless whether it is a masking agent, Billy, to me, it's really only going to affect possibly the post-fight drug test, because obviously you take the test before you do weigh-ins. So you're obviously not taking an IV at that point. So I honestly think that this rule is not really needed. And I think him like saying, oh, you got to apply for this. I think they got to tweak some things around when it comes to MMA, because MMA is not cycling.
This is weird to me because, like, I get it for that side, but I'm thinking more on the weight cutting side, how much this affects for the guys that rehydrate this way. It can be really dangerous to them, and they might have to change. Like, a lot of people you see making that extra cut might not be able to go that low anymore.
Yeah, it's definitely something we're going to have to keep our eye on, and something that I am not for. I'm not for only being able to use 50 milliliters. And if you got to apply for some TUE, as they state there in that article, I got to believe every fighter is going to be doing that. I mean, they're probably going to have a huge log of fighters applying for this. Like, this is just about everybody does it. It's not like it's 1998 here and Randy Couture is the only one doing this or something. You know what I mean? Like, everybody's doing this now. It's very common, and it's, to me, the best way to rehydrate. I mean, sure, you can, drink your bottles of water and that's going to help, but getting directly in your system as quick as that, there's not really another way you can really supplement that to help recover.
Yeah, it's scary. They're going to have to change their whole thing around weight cutting, or it could cause a lot of problems. I'm really not educated enough to speak on the other side, so I don't know enough to give a valid opinion. I'll probably read more into it soon. But the UFC is going to have to do something big around maybe restricting the way they do their weighing in or something to make people not be able to make those bigger cuts.
Absolutely. Something's definitely going to have to change here one way or the other. And like I said, 50 milliliters is not really anything. So in terms of MMA, like I said, you're probably better off just not even bothering. So you can check out the article at Bloody Elbow. It's very interesting, very enlightening, and I think something a lot of fans can check out. Again, it's still on our Facebook page. It was written by Zane Simon there on Bloody Elbow. So definitely give that a look, and that's something that we're probably going to have a ongoing headline as we move forward here in 2015. Let's get to some more headlines here. Jon Jones, as you may know, the former UFC light heavyweight champion, charged with a felony hit and run in the state of New Mexico earlier this year. As of right now, the district attorney there in New Mexico is missing some evidence that may lead to the case getting dismissed. The prosecutor in charge of the case is missing medical records for the alleged victim and the dispatch reports for the Albuquerque Police Department, according to Public Information Officer Brunello. To the public information officers for the Brunello County District Attorney there in New Mexico, and a 60-day deadline has been set, and Jon Jones' case could expire here within the week. And if the prosecutors had met the deadline, the case would have gone before a grand jury. Obviously, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So it is possible that Jon Jones could have the case thrown out if these things are not brought forward. He obviously was arrested. He's still out on bond. So unfortunately for this woman that was in this accident, she could end up not receiving justice, so to speak, here.
Yeah, it's tough, man. I want to see Jones fight again, but I want the right thing to happen for everyone involved in that, you know? Everyone that got injured or anything, well, just that lady, just to have the right justice happen, because it would suck if it got thrown away for something like that. I mean, it's good for Jon Jones. I don't know if the UFC will still act on it and give him some sort of suspension either way, but I just hope the right thing happens. There's not much to say about it.
I would say now this is again in terms of the felony hit and run. Now they still found drugs on the scene, so he's still probably going to face something from that. Because to me, that's a separate thing, them finding drugs and drug paraphernalia in the car. So he's probably going to get some type of fine or community service for that. That's not what it's mentioning. It's mentioning specifically in the hit and run case.
Yeah, that's the worst one too, though, because didn't she broke her arm, right?
Yeah, that was with the reports, and she was pregnant.
So yeah, I hope everything's all right for her at least.
Now, whether or not Jon Jones, whether this case gets thrown out, decides to donate some money to the family is still unforeseen. That is something that could happen. And honestly, if it does get thrown out, I think that'd be a very nice gesture on his side. And I think it would be some good PR for him.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll do something like that, that everyone blow up, make an article, he makes a comeback. It'll all work out all right.
I'm just saying, if I was Jon Jones' PR guy, which I don't know if I've been fired already, that's what I would do.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll see something like that in the future, but it'll probably have to be after everything's over in the case.
Or set up like a college fund for the child, which I don't know if it has been born yet, but that also would be something cool as well.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's move on here. Let's get to some signing news. It does not involve the UFC. This week, some of the UFC's competitors have signed up some notable names. First, Bellator has signed former Ultimate Fighter contestant there, Josh Koscheck. And World Series of Fighting has re-signed some of their top stars. David Branch, Justin Gaethje, and Marlon Moraes all have been re-signed by the World Series of Fighting. The Koscheck thing, you know, who cares? He's definitely towards the end of his career. Koscheck was upset with the Reebok deal, but I don't think it really matters. You know, he's not the guy he once was. And for World Series of Fighting, David Branch doesn't surprise me too much. He's very close to being their champion, I guess, in two different divisions here. And for Justin Gaethje and Marlon Moraes, I kind of think this is a little surprising to me. I felt that both those guys have done what they could under the World Series of Fighting banner, and I think they're ready to move on to bigger and better things. And to me, that's the UFC. And, you know, David Branch is 33 years old. He had a shot in the UFC. You know, he's looking good really right now, but long-term, he's not going to get much better than he is right now. He's really at his peak. whereas Gaethje and Moraes, both very young guys. Marlon Moraes, I believe, is 23 or 24. Same thing with Gaethje. Gaethje only has, like 10 fights. Marlon Moraes, I think, has 13 or 14. These are guys I'd like to see challenged by some of the top guys in the division. Gaethje being at 155, Moraes being at 135. And I don't know what sort of claim they had with being champions, whether there's a period, whether they have to sit out and wait, non-compete, all that sort of stuff. And maybe they just thought it was easier to re-sign a World Series of Fighting. But I would have really tried to push to get to the UFC if I were those two individuals. Now, if you're the World Series of Fighting, I don't blame you one bit. Those are guys you want to keep under their banner. So for them, it's great. But I think individually for the Moraes and Gaethje, I don't think it's that great for their careers moving forward.
Yeah, for the World Series of Fighting, they did their job. Those are some great fighters. They kept them. As for them moving to the UFC, I mean, they're still really young. I don't know what their full deal entails or what it all is, but I'm sure eventually we'll see those guys over there. And I think maybe they want to build up a little more. Who knows?
It doesn't say, it just says multi-year deals. Terms of the deal weren't disclosed. This is according to MMA Junkies. So I don't know how many fights that will be, how long the years, whether there's an opt-out clause, so on and so forth, how much per fight. So we don't necessarily know, but I just think that if you're Gaethje or Moraes, why not test the waters? Even if you end up going back to World Series of Fighting, why not at least entertain into talks with the UFC? Or heck, even Bellator. I think maybe more so for Moraes, because I think the 135 division of Bellator has a lot of good competitors. I think that's even a step up for Moraes. At least enter talks, just see what's out there.
Who knows, though? They could have, we don't really know what they looked into, so it's hard to say.
All right, well, let's get to Bellator here. 139. You might have not known it was going on because I don't remember seeing a promo for Bellator 139 on the big, huge 138 broadcast, so probably a lot of people didn't even know, one, this was going on, and two, might have just skipped it. So I think for Bellator, kind of lost some momentum because there was no title fight on this card or anything. Sure, you had Kongo, but is that really that big a name still in this day and age in MMA? So I think Bellator, after having a big event that people liked and enjoyed, maybe kind of dropped the ball there on the follow-up effort here with Bellator 139 in Kansas. But looking at the fights that did take place, first fight at 145, Pat Curran took on Emmanuel Sanchez. Pat Curran looked a lot better than his fight against Daniel Weichel. His striking was pretty crisp. Obviously, he was great shape for 15 minutes, a guy that has fought, I couldn't even remember his last time he was scheduled only to fight 3 rounds, so he was really good to go. The only thing, and he was a little slow start, you probably could have gave Sanchez the first round, but I still like to see more output from Pat Curran. He has great striking, but I think he maybe could have finished this or made this more one-sided with a little more output. And I think that's really the one thing he's kind of missing from his game, Billy. It's just that output. And like I said, the ability to mix in half power, quarter power strikes with full power and kind of overwhelming his opponent, because I think he has the conditioning and the skill set to do it. And I think that's kind of the one thing missing from his game, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. He was coming off 2 losses, right?
Yes.
So first time he lost twice. I mean, he didn't look too like, oh man, he's like, but he looked good enough to where he got the win. He's getting right back on the right track. I could agree with you. He could definitely use a little more output, maybe get a finish or something. But he did what he had to do. He got back on the winning track, and he looked a lot better.
The next fight evening had a lot of entertainment as Hisaki Kato took on MMA/kickboxer there, Joe Schilling. And this is interesting because even before this fight happened, they already announced that Joe Schilling's going to fight Paul Daly in kickboxing. Very rare do you see a fighter's next fight booked before he's even fought the one that he's about to fight. Very rarely see that happen. And Bellator was really banking on that being a big event, but now it kind of loses some luster here as Joe Schilling got dominated in the first round, got taken down, got held there, and got beat up by Kato. And then the second round, Kato stood and struck with Joe Schilling a little bit, and Schilling maybe a little overconfident of his kickbox skills, kind of was not having his hands very close to the head, and that allowed Kato to land a left-handed Superman punch, knocking out Schilling cold in the second round, officially at the 34-second marker. And boy, not only, first of all, the Superman punch is used a lot. You can see Superman back there, and very successful technique, but very rarely do you see a knockout from it. And then second of all, see the guy just get flattened, the guy that's had so much kickboxing experience just get out cold. This to me is the front runner for knockout of the year. I mean, just tremendous performance by Kato, and obviously a huge upset as well in the process.
Yeah, this is, this for me is knockout of the year so far, partially just because how brutal the knockout was in its own right, and then doing it to Joe Schilling even more. I did never expect this. I mean, he wrestled in the first round. I expected more of that from him, but when he landed that shot, I was blown away. I'm a big Schilling fan. Also, I could be wrong. Don't quote me, but I think I read because of his suspension, he can't fight on that kickboxing card now.
Yeah, see? That's why you don't schedule fights before he fought.
That close in time, too, is just ridiculous. But, yeah, he's so good at kickboxing. I don't know if he got overconfident. It's the difference in the glove sizes. He kind of didn't read it right, but either way, that was a nasty knockout for Kato. I mean, you'll see his name everywhere now for some big fights.
Yeah, he's definitely a guy to look out for there at 185 pounds. Very excited for Kato if he can bring more of that to the table. The next fight of the evening was at 155 pounds. Former UFC and longtime MMA veteran John Alessio took on kind of the hometown crowd there, the hometown guy there in Kansas, and David Rickles. Once again, a very dominant performance by David Rickles, but just got a little careless, threw a knee to the head of a grounded opponent. John Alessio was not able to continue because of how quickly it was into the fight, being stopped by Rob Hinds, the 224 marker. It ends up going down as a no contest due to an illegal blow. Very unfortunate for David Rickles, not just because it still kind of keeps him back in the lightweight division, but obviously he's fought several times there in that Mulvane, Kansas. The fans love going there. You saw the reaction when he comes out. He's a great personality for Bellator, and very unfortunate, for the fans there in Kansas that their man David Rickles couldn't come away from the victory because he was on his way to winning. It looked like he was going to get the finish there, and just kind of, once again, kind of instinct there, just kind of going for the kill. Sometimes you forget about the rules, and he threw that knee there.
Yeah, that one was tough. I mean, even if he would have threw a couple more punches, I think that fight would have been stopped. So I think as far as Bellator, they're going to kind of count it as a win, I feel. They're going to move him forward either way. He was a couple of punches being stopped. It sucks because I don't know how his pay works for that, like the win or anything. That kind of sucks, but I think they'll push him forward like he won the fight. He dominated. He was 2 punches away from it being stopped anyway.
And real quickly for John Alessio, now 35 years old, he has lost, if you count this one as a loss, he has lost 4 out of his last 6 fights here. Officially, he's only lost 3 out of his last 6, but 2 of those were no contest due to one being an eye poke and the other one now this illegal blow. He hasn't won since 2012. I think it might be time for Mr. Alessio to hang it up. He's had a very long and fruitful career, but I don't really see it anymore from him, regardless of the weight class.
Yeah, it's so hard now, though. You see all these crazy comeback stories like Arlovsky or Robbie Lawler, and it's just hard to tell people to hang it up when there's like 38-year-old champions. It's tough. You never know.
Well, obviously, I think it's one of those things where I don't think Bellator's – I don't think they're going to cut him after this fight, but if he loses another, I think even they'll cut him. And if that happens, you definitely got to start looking to hang him up if you're Alessio. But he's a guy that can easily make a transition to a coach. I mean, a guy that's had that much experience, he's definitely a guy that, if you're a young fighter, that I would say that's a good guy to try to learn under.
Yeah, I could see that. That'd be a good role because it's tough for a lot of these guys to make money after they get out of it.
The main event of the evening, former UFC fighter Czech Kongo took on former Bellator heavyweight champion Alexander Volkov. And Kongo the kind of his MO, even though he's known for being a great striker, he's really good at being on top and controlling on top. And that's what he did in this fight against Volkov, not allowing Volkov any chance to show off his fantastic striking skills as well. And one thing I got to mention, when Volkov first burst onto the scene for Bellator, he was really skinny and a guy I thought should fight at 205 pounds. He's kind of bulked up a little bit since then, in the couple years since he burst onto the scene. In fact, that's like the biggest I've ever seen him look. Volkov, in terms of size, he looks put on a lot of weight. If you look at a picture at him in this fight against Kongo and when he first appeared in Bellator, very different. Now, whether or not he can still make it down to 205, I'm not sure. But I think after this fight, Billy, he's going to have to really consider it. Not only that, just because I think the heavyweight division's dead, there's not a lot of talent there, just for the fact of having better fights. Bellator has a lot more interesting guys at 205, and also for your career moving forward, you're just not going to, if you can't hang with the takedowns of Czech Kongo, what are you going to do when you face a guy that's like actually like a real wrestler?
Yeah, I actually like a lot of Bellator's 205ers too, and I mean, Czech Kongo just looked pretty strong here. He held him down, didn't let him do much, landed his ground and pound, and really had his way this fight. So it's tough.
Well, we'll see what happens with Volkov, but like I said, I'm now back on the train of him moving down to 205. Whether he's got to take like a catchweight bout at 215 or whatever the case may be, I think he's got to try to get down there because, like I said, the heavyweight division overall is kind of dead, especially for Bellator, and I just think it makes more sense for him to drop down.
Yeah, there's a lot more better fight opportunities for him.
Could you imagine if he fought Liam McGarry? I mean, Volkov's like 6'7", McGarry's like 6'6". That'd be tremendous.
The striking would be crazy.
And then obviously, you got King Mo and Emmanuel Newton, Linton Vassell, Tito Ortiz. There's a lot of guys down there. And if Francis Carmel stays at 205, obviously Phil Davis was just added to the roster.
Yeah.
So there's some interesting guys there.
Plays out, but there's a lot.
Let's get to UFC Fight Night 70, Machida versus Romero from Hollywood, Florida at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino. 5 fights were shown on the main card. The first fight of the evening was at 145 pounds as Hakran Diaz took on Levon Machiavelli. Ended up being a pretty close fight here. Billy went down as a split decision for Hakran Diaz. Kind of looking over this fight in terms of stats, Machiavelli actually outstruck Diaz 66-30. Diaz was successful on 3 of 10 takedowns, 2 of 8 for Machiavelli. Both those were in the second round. And I thought Diaz definitely won the first round. He had that early takedown, really controlled there. Round 2, despite having a kind of triangle choke opportunity, I probably would have gave that round to I probably would have gave it to Hakran Diaz. He was able to land 2 takedowns. Machiavelli did do a lot on the feet, but I think that submission kind of really weighed on me because that was the most significant thing done in the round. And then the third round, I think I definitely would have gave to Machiavelli. 0 for 6 on takedowns was Diaz. Machiavelli also outstruck Diaz 22-8. Also landed a takedown of his own. Very close fight. I think it went to me how you scored the second round. I think it was pretty apparent Diaz won the first. Machiavelli won the third. It was kind of how you scored that second round, and 2 judges had it the way of Diaz, so he gets the win there in Hollywood, Florida.
Yeah, it was a close fight. I think watching it, I do remember sort of siding on Diaz there. I thought it was a good call, but I mean, I'd have to rewatch it to fully know, to give it another go. But Hakran Diaz takes away with a decent win. It was a pretty good fight, really close.
The next fight of the evening, and speaking of knockout of the year, you had 2 knockout of the year candidates in one weekend as Steve Bossy finally made his UFC debut against Thiago Santos. And we kind of expected this one to be fast-paced, with both guys having a lot of knockouts, 14 knockouts between these 2 gentlemen. And that's the way it ended, as pretty much most of the feeling out period for majority of his fights only lasted about 30 seconds, and then all of a sudden Santos unleashed a brutal head kick and just flattened Steve Bossy. who was out cold officially 29 seconds. And that was all she wrote as Thiago Santos gets the flashy knockout there. And like I said, in the process, he's also a candidate for knockout of the year with that head kick.
Yeah, the head kick was nasty. I think he threw a body kick right before, and then he committed a little bit too much to block that. And then as he went to throw the second one, he seen the same thing, adjusted up, and finished nasty.
Now, the next fight of the evening, really want to talk about for two things. One, we kind of talked about Eddie Truck Gordon using more of weight cutting procedures and getting his diet right and whatnot as he took on Antonio Carlos Jr. And I thought in terms of physique, Eddie Gordon looked great. That's probably the best shape I've seen him look in, even going back to his days on Ultimate Fighter. And you look at a guy in Antonio Carlos Jr., a guy that started his career at heavyweight on the Ultimate Fighter Brazil, then fought at 205, now dropping down to 185. And not only did he handle the weight cut well, something we weren't sure he could do, Billy, he was able to use his size to his advantage. As Eddie Truck Gordon, a guy that we know is pretty physically strong at 185, looked like a kid out there against Antonio Carlos Jr. And Eddie Truck Gordon really couldn't do much to stop the big Brazilian from taking him down. 4 of 8 officially on takedowns, but even when it came to striking, when Eddie Gordon had relief of not having that big dude on top of him, he got outstruck 76-39 en route to a third round rear naked choke victory by the Brazilian, officially at the 4:37 marker. And as much as Eddie Truck Gordon got his weight under control and nutrition and looked in really good shape, you got to credit Antonio Carlos Jr. for being able to make this cut, look healthy, and go 15 minutes. And if he can keep up, a pace like that, Billy, with his size, he's a scary guy to look out for. And let's not forget, he's only 25 years old, and this was only his 6th professional MMA fight. This guy has a lot of potential.
He looks so big. It didn't even look right that they were in there with each other. And he did what he had to do, and he held them. But, yeah, like I said, the most to take away from it, too, is he looked healthy the whole time. He didn't look drained. He kept his pace up. So really look out for that dude.
And earlier in the week, the UFC cut the brother of Bellator champion Douglas Lima and former Ultimate Fighter winner Diego Lima. That's the guy Eddie Gordon beat to become the Ultimate Fighter that season. He got cut. Now with this loss, Eddie Gordon is now 1-3 in the UFC, losing his 3 fights after beating Lima. It's probably a chance that Eddie Truck Gordon gets cut as well.
Yeah, it's tough. I'd like to see him get another fight because I do like him, and I think he got it together. He just ran into the wrong dude right now. I think Antonio Carlos Jr. was operating at a different level, but you never know in the UFC. He might get cut.
The co-main event of the evening was in the welterweight division as former Strikeforce fighter Lorenz Larkin took on another guy from tough Brazil in Santiago Ponzinibbio. And I think we were right, Billy. This one was going to be exciting. We were going to see a lot of stand-up action. And the key was, with Ponzinibbio's aggressive nature, would he still be able to maybe get to more of a maybe calm, cool, and relaxed Lorenz Larkin? That was kind of what we were looking at in this matchup. Could kind of that moving forward style be able to beat Lorenz Larkin? And I think that aggressive nature did give Larkin problems. I think the constant moving forward, I think he did put the pressure on. But what I think has plagued Ponzinibbio here in the UFC, and he's something he has to change, more wide looping power punches instead of straight punches down the middle. You saw a guy that was a little more of a brawler, whereas if you look at Lorenz Larkin, a very much a refined striker. And that was really, to me, the big difference of this fight. Even though Ponzinibbio was being aggressive and eating a lot of those shots, everything Larkin's doing was technically perfect. He had the leg kicks going. He had the straight combos going. He had counters going. He had the lateral movement going. And Ponzinibbio, yes, he was landing some power shots, don't get me wrong, but they were not happening at the same frequency as Lorenz Larkin was able to land. Overall, Larkin outstruck Ponzinibbio 71-36. Ponzinibbio also failed in his attempts to try to move it to the ground, 0 for 3 on takedowns. And Larkin just, I think he proved that he's good at 170, even though it didn't go a full 15 minutes, Billy. I thought his conditioning was fine. It looked great up until the point where he was able to get the finish with punches in the clinch there. Herb Dean had to stop this one while standing at the 3:07 marker in the second round. And like I said, the output was there. Not only did he land 71, he threw 122. So he was on a very good pace, obviously, as that round went forward. And I thought he put it all together. If someone thought that the win against John Howard was a fluke, I don't think you can say that now, because he put a sound beating on a tough competitor in Ponzinibbio there in Florida.
Yeah, Ponzinibbio looked tough, man. He kept moving forward, landing shots, but Larkin looked fast, strong, healthy, kept his movement up. He landed his shots and eventually got the finish. But I think Larkin looked really good. I didn't expect it, honestly, how good he looked, but I'm hoping he gets a big fight next, because that was a good fight. Ponzinibbio was tough, too. He never really stayed out. He kept moving forward, landed shots. So I'd like to see big stuff for Lorenz Larkin in the future.
A matchup I threw on Twitter was for Larkin to take on the winner of Stephen Thompson and Jake Ellenberger, who fight at the Ultimate Fighter finale coming up on the 12th of July. And I think that would be an excellent fight for two reasons. One, if it's Stephen Thompson, you have, that crazy creative karate style against Lorenz Larkin. That would be amazing to see. And then if Ellenberger wins, obviously you have a guy who's big, strong, powerful, and a great wrestler. So I think either is a great challenge for Lorenz Larkin. And obviously both those guys are either in or near the top 15, which is where Larkin's kind of knocking on the door. So I think from that standpoint, it's also a good matchup with either of those two gentlemen.
Yeah, I don't want to be biased at all, but I want to see that Thompson fight so bad. That'd be so exciting. Both there standing in the ring. Oh, man.
Also, another name, two names. You could also throw in the winner of Gunnar Nelson and Brandon Thatch at 189.
Yeah, I don't know if that'd be too much, but that'd be good. I really want to see that Thompson fight. I'm kind of stuck on that. Not even giving Thompson the win already over Ellenberger, because Ellenberger's strong, man. You never know with him, but Thompson's so exciting. Larkin's really exciting. I'd love to see that.
Let's get to the main event here of UFC Fight Night 70, Lyoto Machida against Yoel Romero. And looking at this fight, I thought the first round was pretty even, but I would have gave it to Lyoto Machida, as it seemed like he was moving in and out a little more, was throwing more combinations. And round two, also another very close round, but it seemed towards the end that Romero landed a couple of really heavy shots that may have kind of stunned Machida, and I think that kind of swayed my mind in giving him round two, but a very even fight. And then in round number three, kind of more of the same, and then all of a sudden, credited with only his second takedown attempt, landed it. Romero just unleashed a flurry of elbows to the head of Lyoto Machida, and the referee, Big John McCarthy, just had to come flying in to stop this one at the 138 marker. And regardless of how long the fight went, if you would have told me that Yoel Romero only landed one takedown in this fight and won, I wouldn't have believed you, to be quite honest. But that's what happened in this fight, is Romero was able to land one takedown and take this fight away from the former light heavyweight champion. And not only did he reassert himself as a top contender for the middleweight division, did Romero, I think he also signaled the end of Lyoto Machida in the UFC.
Yeah, I'm pretty sad about this one, because I love Lyoto all time. He's one of my favorites, but Romero might be the most athletic dude I've ever seen. He's 38 years old, and the way he dropped levels real quick, or keep up with the striking even, which amazed me. And then when he did get the one takedown, he exploded that quick and ended it. Romero he keeps impressing me. I really want to see this dude get a title shot. He'll probably get the Jacare matchup now again. I don't know what's lined up, because I think, is Weidman Rockhold official?
I think that's the matchup in terms of a date and or event. I don't think that has been booked. Obviously, I think they were holding out for trying to have that in New York this year. Obviously, that didn't happen, as once again, legislators did not vote to legalize mixed martial arts in the state of New York. They'll have to wait next year, I think, or 2 years. I'm not sure how the voting process goes. I'm not a resident of the state of New York, but they're going to have to wait a little longer for MMA in New York. So that may have derailed their plans for kind of having a homecoming for Chris Weidman. So they're probably looking for a venue and date for that. But yeah, like you said, I think Romero Jacare is next. But yeah, just an awfully impressive performance by Yoel Romero. And for Lyoto Machida, I think we said this also in the Luke Rockhold fight, still able to hang with people standing up. I think that's very apparent even in the Luke Rockhold fight, but it just seems when it hits the ground, I don't know if it's a strength thing, if it's being old thing, reaction. I don't know what it is. It just seems that Lyoto Machida, a guy that used to have great takedown defense. I mean, heck, you can even look to his fight against Chris Weidman, where he had great down defense. Just a year ago, he was still tough to take down. And now all of a sudden, not only is he easy to take down, he's easy to handle when it goes to the ground. And, a guy who had some losses in his career, sure, but really, other than the Shogun fight, hadn't been finished. And he goes back-to-back finished losses, now 38 years old. It's definitely time for him to look. Whether or not he wants one more chance at getting a win, I don't know. But it's definitely something 2015 may be the last time we see Lyoto Machida.
Yeah, I think we'll see him one or two more times, but I did read that he's out indefinitely as suspension because of his head injury. So I don't know how bad it is, but man, these last two knockouts really bad on him. I'd like to see him just hang it up. I don't want to see any more of it, even though his striking, unless they pair him with just a striker and just do some exciting fights. But other than that, I kind of hope it's the end. And on another note on Romero, imagine if this dude had done MMA his whole life. He might be the most scary dude ever. He's 38 years old, relatively new to the sport, and he just looks amazing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think obviously the delay hurt him in terms of progressing as a title contender sooner. And now I think we will get that Jacare matchup that we were supposed to get back in April. And I like it because it really sets up the division nicely. Some people might be clamoring for Romero to move up, but the fact that he's going to have to wait for Rockhold and Weidman to fight, it only makes sense to have him fight Jacare. And obviously it makes sense for Jacare because he beat Chris Camuzzi again on 10 days notice. Big deal. That's not necessarily a great fight to say, yeah, this guy should be fighting for the title. So it really works out well for both gentlemen.
Yeah, it makes a clear number one contender fight, no questions. And I think it'll be a good fight. It'll be really exciting because, yeah, Romero can take you down. Does he want to take Jacare down? You never know. It's a good fight.
Well, I want to, before we end the show, make a small programming note. We're going to try to have a split show next week. Or I'm sorry, not next week, in 2 weeks. Next week, we will be obviously picking the fights for UFC 189, the Ultimate Fighter finale. We're also going to pick the fights for UFC Fight Night San Diego, Fight Night 71. That happens Wednesday, July 15th. So because of that week of the 15th, we're going to have a split show. So in 2 weeks, we will have a split show, but we're going to pick the fights early. So most likely we'll probably have a show Tuesday at some point live and then go live some point on Thursday. So kind of letting fans know. And also by the time the 25th comes around, probably right after we do that split show, we'll also be looking to do our next contest giveaway in conjunction with UFC on Fox 16 there in Chicago. So that's what we got coming up here for the month of July. Any final thoughts before we end the show here, Billy?
Nothing too much. Just hopefully nothing else happens in 189 and everything goes smooth.
All right, we got to give some shout-outs to our friends at MMAinsider.net, MMAforlife.ca, TopRatedMMA.com, and we've been announcing this a lot, but they have an official Facebook page for the MMA Classic Expo put on by AJ Hiller and the folks there at MMASignaturesUSA.com. So we've already told you about the event, Syracuse, New York, Friday and Saturday, October 3rd and 4th, there to get a whole bunch of autographs from MMA fighters. I think they were just under 500 likes for the page, the event page, when I last checked. And I think if they got to 500, they were going to announce another round of fighters that are going to attend. As of right now, I think they believe Stipe Miocic is going to be there. They have a list already. Efrain Escudero is going to be there, and like I said, more names that come, and they're kind of unveiling it slowly as the event moves on to build some suspense. So go over there to the MMA Classic Facebook page, like it, and you can check out all the information. I believe hotel information is coming soon as well, so that's an event you don't want to miss. Again, October 3rd and 4th in Syracuse, New York. So for Billy Brandt, I am Jim Gramm, and thank you for listening to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast.